did my PhD in France in the University of Montpellier in the laboratory of Jacques Mercier under the supervision of Magali Kitzman, and my PhD was about the accumulation of fat inside skeletal muscle and the cause of fat accumulation inside skeletal muscle, because fat accumulation is a cause of type 2 diabetes development. So my PhD project was able to gave me the chance to do my postdoctoral project in Dr. Harper Laboratory at the University of Ottawa, since what I did during my PhD was closely related to what I am doing right now. My project is still on skeletal muscle lipid accumulation and the development of type 2 diabetes. And it's known that during type 2 diabetes, but also before the type 2 diabetes development, there is a malfunction of skeletal muscle, dysfunction of lipid utilization inside skeletal muscle, which is one cause of the development of insulin resistance. But the problem is that the current method to measure fatty acid oxidation inside skeletal muscle are very invasive or very expensive. So we want to develop a very simple test to be able to detect in the blood factor of a bad or good muscle fatty acid oxidation. So we are currently working on mice with different degree of fatty acid oxidation in their muscle, and the mice run a short exercise, 30-minute exercise, right before taking a blood sample, and we do a metabolomic analysis on their blood, so which can allow to have all metabolites in their blood, and depending if the mice have a good fatty acid oxidation in their muscle or bad fatty acid oxidation in their muscle, we can determine which factor in the blood are representative of a good or of a bad fatty acid oxidation in their muscle. The result we have right now show that the acyl carnitines are a good marker of bad fatty acid oxidation in their muscle. The acyl carnitine represent incomplete fatty acid oxidation, and so the mice with a bad fatty acid oxidation showed higher acyl carnitine level in their blood. My project is financed by the NIH, the National Institute of Health in the US, and is equivalent in Canada, the CHR. And we are collaborating with a team in UC Davis, the University of California in Davis, with Sean Adams, which initiated that project. And Sean Adams is working on like human population with protein dysfunction, which is exactly the same protein. So we are working on UCP3. We have the mice with the same dysfunction of the same protein here in Ottawa, and so we can compare if the result on human are the same as the result on mice. And the blood sample that we take on our mice are sending to UC Davis for the metabolomic analysis, which is done in Dr. Oliver Finn laboratory. There is the French Diabetes Association and the Canadian Diabetes Association. They are financed by the population, and so people give money for research about diabetes. And it seems that there is more money in Canada than in France, and I guess this is because there is more, the obesity and the diabetes is more important in Canada than in France. And just to give an example, like the Canadian Diabetes Association gives per year about 20 to 30 postdoctoral fellowship for the postdoctoral salaries. And in France, it's just like 4 or 5 per year. And there is also money coming from the government in both countries. And here again, I think that the money in Canada is higher than in France. And I guess this is because there is more diabetic and more obese people in Canada than in France. So the government as well as the population is more involved in that and just want to give more money for the research about diabetes and obesity in Canada. Yeah, I still have some relation with my French PhD laboratory, since I still have to publish some research that are not published yet. And we also want to collaborate between the University of Ottawa and a laboratory in Paris, where they have some mice that are important for our project. And so we would like to collaborate with that team in Paris, and it's a team with which I already collaborate during my PhD. So there is a difference to teach at the university between France and Canada. In science, for example, in France we focus more on the theory and in Canada it's more practical and there are more interaction with the professor. And for research, in Canada they can begin research very early at the university. They have scholarship for students at the first year of university to do research in laboratory, for example during the summers. And in France, the first time you can do research is during your fourth year of university. So they have a better background in research in Canada than in France. But it is also important to note that during the PhD, I think the way the PhD is done in France is better than in Canada, because in France, a professor can have only 2 students to supervise, and in Canada they can have a lot of students, 10 or 15 students. So the students are better supervised in France than in Canada.